welcome again back. You can see from the agenda. Today I don't have a presentation. There was zippo time to put any slides together. I must say this time the IBM has figured out how to work us every single minute of the day and a few extra ones as well. But I'm busy with a small project looking at an MQ and MQ in containers and so on. I promise there's now 2 weeks in a row that we're doing MQ. We'll do another one, a different one next week. But if you look at the MQ itself, it's been able to run in containers for 5.5 to 6 years now already. So it's one of the older products that we've been containerized, and it's also one of the more difficult ones because for those pesky persistent messages, you need to store them some way. So you always need a volume and things like that around. So I've decided what is a very easy way of getting MQ up and going in a container. And where's my website? So if you look at the IBM website around this, if you go to, sorry, not the IBM, the Docker website, if you just search on MQ space Docker, it'll take you almost straight to this site. So this is where the MQ image is sitting on Docker that you can pull down. And there's a little bit of information around how to run it, how to set it up. And if it's a first time usage, it might be a little bit confusing on what you need to do. There's all kinds of things. What is the attacks that they've used for all the versions, the Docker file itself, on what you can do, and this looks quite imposing, etc. And so I've decided what is absolutely the simplest way that we can do to make this happen. So I've started. So on my side, what I've done is I've installed Docker Desktop. I've got a Windows desktop, and just a straightforward installation, and I let it update itself. It's been running there for 2 years or so, and then the only thing I've pre-done in this, except from playing with it a little bit, I've cleaned up, was to actually download the MQ image itself, that base image you've seen on the web page from Dockerfile. So if I do MQ Docker images, you see the one right at the top. It says IBM.com/MQ. So it will be this IBM.com/MQ image sitting right there. And it's got a tag of latest, and you see that image itself is about 6 weeks old. I think I've downloaded this one about 2 or 3 weeks ago onto my machine. And then I just need to get to a little bit of my information. So to run this environment, I've opened up a PowerShell, and for MQ itself, you need to create a volume where you can save the persistent messages in. So the command for doing that in Docker is just docker volume create. I'm going to call my volume qm1.dat. Enter on that. So if I say docker volume list info, you can see there's my qm1.dat sitting there. Then for the most basic setup that you can do, I'm going to do this run file. So I've run it. So what I'm doing is I'm going to do a Docker run. It's going to create a runtime environment for me. I'm calling it a name of QM1. And then there's at least these 2 parameters that you need to pass into that container. First of all, that yes, you've got a license to run this. You accept this. So if it's on your workstation, you don't pay for IBM for MQ for development. That is for free. So you're more than welcome to use license accept for that. And then the name of the queue manager I want to create in there. So I'm going to call it QM1. I'm also pointing my volume, this QM1.dat. There's the QM1.dat. I say mount it as mount/MQM, because the MQ expects, if you can read this documentation on Dockerfile, that is where it wants to write its information. And I'm exposing 2 ports internally inside that container. It's running port 1414 and 9443 1414 is, of course, our classical MQ default listener. I'm actually saying that in my environment, expose that as 1480, and take this 9443, expose it in my environment as 9460. This will be the console point, and I'll show you the console now. And then I say, run it for me in the background, -D, and pull for me and use for me this image. I've downloaded this one, ibm.com.mq. Use that one as the base. You can see it returns for me an image ID. So if I do docker ps, you'll see there's my running container up and running with MQ inside it. Now I can go and have a look at the console. So let me just have a look at the console, and I'm exposing. Let me just browser. I can try and log in to that console. There you go. So advanced, accept the risk and continue. Logging in with admin, and you'll see inside that documentation, it tells you that the default password is password with a 0. I can log in. So this is now the console talking to that queue manager that's running in a container. You see there's QM1. And there's a default setup that's been created for you. One of the settings you can do there, you will see is yes, create for me the default objects in there. So there's a dead letter queue and 2 queues I can put things to. I can also go into my MQ, my standard MQ Explorer, and I can try and connect to that queue manager, because that's still the way I prefer to work with the MQ. So I can say add for me QM1 in there, connect directly, the host name or the IP address. Remember we went here, so it's listening on 1480. Sorry, host name. Host. 1480, and I know the channel it creates for me in there is dev. Next, I'm going to enable my user. So the user, I need to log in with his admin, and I'm going to give it a password. And it's in here. So if I look at this QM1 that's running on port 1480, I can go into the queues there, and you'll see I've got the same set of information there. But now, what if I don't use this as my default queue manager, and I actually want to specify information, create me for maybe a few extra queues in there for a default, create me a channel, any of those kind of things you would like to do in a queue manager. For that to work, I need to show you 2 files. First of all, I need to create what they call a Docker file. There's my Docker file I've created. So I say, for my image, go and pull for me from ibm.com.mq, the latest one. That is my base image. And then copy for me this file into this directory, /etc/mqm. The rules for MQ says that whatever this file is there, if it finds an MQSC file in that directory, it's going to do a run MQSC against that file. Inside that file, I've copied this information. I said define queue local, define for me another queue local, and there's another one. I've created the transmission queue and the remote queue definition on this line over here, and I've also defined for me a channel. And I alter some of my queue manager to see if I can get away with some of the restrictions for security. Now, if I look at the directory I'm in here, the one thing you need to remember is that you need to run your build in the same directory where your Docker file is sitting. And if you do that copy file that we've seen inside my Docker file, that copy file, is this file sitting in this directory over here. So if I go and do my Docker build, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another image in there. So I'm going to say build for me from this Docker file here, a new image, and call it MQ test. It's going to pull that MQ that is sitting already in that environment. So it's not going to download it for me. It's going to use the latest one. So you can see there it's tagged my new one as latest as well. If I now do Docker images, you'll see right at the top there was my previous one, IBM.com/MQ, the one that I've pulled from Docker app. And there's the new one I've built for my own usage in here now. So I've got an image, and I can use that image now to start up a new container. So I've got another command here that I've prepared. So I'm going to say Docker run for me, give this one a name of QM2, accept the license, give the queue manager the name of QM2, use, I haven't created that environment, so I first need to go and create that volume. I forgot about that. I've created one earlier. There it is. I'm just going to do it. QM2.
So can I ask a question about that volume?
Yes, sure.
Okay, it's been a while since I worked with MQ on the file system, but on that volume, that mount point that you make there, what goes into that? Is that only things like messages that you want to keep, persistent messages, or are some of the configuration stuff also go in there?
Some of the configuration stuff also goes in there, Tony.
Okay, so if I reuse that volume, then if I recreate my container or my image, and I reuse that volume, won't it clash with the commands that's in your configuration file?
Yeah, so I think I remember I've done this a few weeks ago, and it actually picked up the original one there, and it didn't create for me. I tried to create new queues in there, and it didn't want to create new queues for me. So I think that one that overrides what you're trying to do. I'm not 100% sure. You know, I've been able to add more than one queue manager into the same share, and it was working perfectly okay. So the jury is still a little bit out on that one. I'm not 100% sure. I know I also, to get things to work, before I had to delete that volume and start over again. But that is part of the beauty of that, of the Docker file, and that one file you copy in there, so you can recreate your environment exactly as it was before.
Yeah. So, but what you want to do is every time you create a new container or a new image, you want to run the whole thing from scratch again, so that all your commands run again. But your persistent stuff, like your messages and those things, you want to have in a volume, so that if you start it up, you've still got those. So I think, we're going to read up a bit about that.
I hear what you say. I hear what you say. So let me go and do some tests, and maybe I can get to the right answer in there. Because I know I've deleted queue managers completely. I've deleted the container, and I've left that volume there, and I was able to carry on from where I left when I created a new one.
Thanks.
With the messages in the queues, yeah. All right, so what we're going to do is, and we're going to create a new container with a QM2. You can see there's my volume pointing to the other volume, and I'm going to share my port now. I'm making it 48081. My console is, I've increased the port with 1 as well. And now I'm not pulling from the MQ, IBM.com MQ, I'm pulling from my image, MQ test, the one I've just created. All right, let's go in there, enter on that. Right, so if I do Docker, yes, there's my 2 queue managers running at the moment. I've called the containers QM1 and QM2. That is actually saving that data inside the queue. So if I'm going to go into this queue, dev to queue, and I change the properties of it, and let's say the default persistence of this one is going to be persistent. Apply. Okay. And I'm going to put a message into this this queue here. This is now the non-persistent one. And I'm going to put another message in here. If I refresh here, let me just see if I've got those queues. Yes, they are up there, up and running. So let me kill this queue manager. So I can say Docker stop queuing one. And I can even remove that image. I can say Docker remove queuing1. So Docker -a. You'll see there's that 5 is sitting there and another one is sitting there. So if I go back and I recreate queuing1, there we go. And I need to reconnect here. And I will go into the queues. You see my persistent message has survived that environment then. Okay, any questions up to this point? Who has played with this environment and has created some silly MQQ managers running in Docker?
I've done it with Francois. Like I said, I played a bit with WAS and with MQ on Docker, and it seems to be working perfectly fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've also played with both WAS and MQ a long time ago, and the basic things you need to think carefully about is your volumes, and then what you want to achieve with this, how you want to run it and recreate your containers.
Exactly, is that recreation now. Also, you know, what we find is that if you're running with Kubernetes or something like that, is one of the most difficult things is how do you make sure that your channels and those things reconnect every time to the queue manager on the other side, or how do you publish it? So inside something like OpenShift, you know, you just create routes and things like that. That's quite easy. It is not so easy to create it in a basic Docker environment. In other words, as any of you guys set up in this fashion, just in Docker, 2 queue managers and set up the channels between those 2 queue managers and make it to connect?
No, I haven't.
I tried it yesterday and I couldn't get it to connect. It was just retrying on that channel permanently. So, yeah, so it did create all my other artifacts. So you see, I just don't know why MQ Explorer can't get in. But you see, there's my Q1, etc. that I've created in there. Local queues, remote, etc. If I go to communication, to my queue manager channels, there's my channel I've created in there. So it did create those artifacts in there. For some reason, my MQ Explorer doesn't want to go in there. Maybe it's holding something or something behind the scenes. But there you can see my objects was created. Let's just see this QM2. This should be a transmission queue. QM2. If I look at, there it is. My usage is transmission, so this is a transmission queue. All right, guys, any other questions? Otherwise, I'm going to give you 10 minutes back on your day.
Francois, is there anything in the MQ error log to see why you couldn't connect?
Yeah, I've looked at the MQ error log before, and I couldn't really get anything good from it. I looked at it about 2 days ago when the same thing happened to me. So there was just, you know, in fact, it showed me the everything was valid up to that point. Maybe I can just see if I can do maybe in the Docker environment. This I haven't checked. Docker logs QM1. So you see, there's the last one I've done. That's actually when it's creating all of that artifacts in there. So from a pure Docker logs point of view, there's nothing in there. It's just the default setup, as you can see in there. And in here, everything was created. There's those alter commands I've put in the end, you know, and the creations of everything else.
So there was no error there from when you tried to connect from the Explorer?
No, not in here. Oh, maybe there's one there. There it says, admin has insufficient authority to access object QM1. Why would admin have insufficient authority?
And then is that OAM? Does it not have connect access on the queue manager or something? It's not the group.
Yeah, but you've just seen in the first bit of today, I've done exactly the same, and it was working. For the first QM1, it was working. When I tried to add the second queue manager in there, it wasn't working. And I know yesterday or the day before, I got rid of that by actually stopping this this window. I rebooted my machine. I stopped and start Docker Desktop. So I think it might be something in Docker Desktop that is breaking. Entity admin has insufficient authority, but you know, I've just used admin in this one here to log in there and have a look, and then it was working okay. So this is admin going in there as well.
Is it not trying to use your local account called VDM to so is it not trying to use the fact that you have a local account on your host, which is your Docker machine, and having access with that user ID?
Okay, I'm stumped at this moment. I don't know why this environment doesn't want to go in there, but if I log in from the console, it actually goes in there quite happily. I wonder if it's not ports, you know, that's 1480. Maybe it's listening on something else. I don't know. All right, guys, then that is it for this week. Tony, Johan, and Emil, if you play with me for this and get me a solution for that, how to make 2 bare knuckles Docker containers to communicate with each other, I really appreciate that.
Will do.
100%.
Okay,
Okay, guys.
Okay, go well.
Thank you for attending.
Okay, bye.